Hi everyone, so I'm starting like a little mini series on the typology of different INFJs that I developed in this book, The Infinite Soul, which is my new book on the INFJ. It's a very nice book. It's the sequel to the Ecstatic Soul, which is still available and you can still get, which delves more deeply into the psychology and existential constitution of INFJs. It's more about INFJs, how they act out in the world today, leading purposeful, meaningful lives or not, their struggles in that regard. And in the Infinite Soul, I develop a typology, if you like, of three different types of INFJ modes of existence. So again, we're not talking about a cognitive function stack. We're not talking about looking at how the psyches of these three subtypes are different. We're looking at how these subtypes deserve to be called subtypes because there are certain patterns of INFJs behaving in the world, and we can propose to divide them into three families, right? And this is what I do in this book. In this book, I look at those three subtypes and how they relate to the domain of the spiritual, to loving relationships and friendships, but also to the question of having fun, of laughter, and of donning or not donning social personas. To an extent we all do, but there's a lot of analysis of this in this book. And today I just want to focus on the first subtype of INFJ, which is the INFJ that I call the adaptive INFJ or the adaptive submissive INFJ, right? If you are a follower of my video, you're familiar with this terminology by now, probably. It's always good to delve a bit deeper. So again, one thing that I want to emphasize and follows the methodology of my methodology in general, which I like to call Jungian existentialist, but it's a methodology that really comes across in the Infinite Soul, is that we don't really want to create very rigid categories, right? We're looking at empirically at how INFJs behave in the world, and we propose to divide them, but this is kind of meant to be a pragmatic differentiation. I'm not pretending that there is an essential, there's something, an essence that belongs to every distinction. And in fact, there's no doubt it's possible to navigate between types. In other words, of these three types, we're looking at the adaptive today, but there's also the solipsistic and the liberated. Well, the liberated is probably where everyone wants to aim for. Clearly, you have to get there. So which means that you're probably going to be adaptive or solipsistic before that. So again, those are family resemblances rather than rigid types. In any case, our adaptive INFJ, why do I call him or her adaptive or adaptive submissive? Well, I mean, you know, the main challenge, the main existential challenge of this INFJ, of this person who sees themselves as INFJ, for whom the INFJ vocabulary is the most suitable one to describe their emotions, their mental state, their aspirations and visions, is authenticity. The nemesis of this particular subtype of INFJ is authenticity. So if you are an INFJ and you're relatively observant, right, and you're able to coolly consider your various traits as a person or listen to the opinion of other people that you trust, you may consider that you have issues with authenticity, or you may not have issues with authenticity. In fact, in the case of other subtypes of INFJ, the issue with authenticity, which is very real as a baseline for many INFJs, is corrected by creating other issues. And only the synthesis of a liberated INFJ resolves all these, and we will be looking at these in further videos. In the case of the adaptive INFJ, the issue is authenticity. It's felt very strongly, just in the sense that this is the kind of INFJ who copes in the world. If we start from the presupposition that the world today, because we're interested in the world today, it's kind of inimical to a lot of INFJ self-expression, because INFJs are going to be considered kind of strange and kind of slow-moving and kind of asocial in some ways, or, you know, they're going to seem like they don't really fit in, and they're going to experience via FE the pressure to fit in, right? So at that point, there's a decision that's going to have to be made between, okay, do I just get along with other people at the price of a certain neutralization or atrophy of my unique worldview, which is my NI imbued worldview, or do I kind of repress that, I kind of silence that, I tone it down and mute it so that people can sort of see my more kind of agreeable and indeed adaptive side. And so that's what I like to call sometimes in ordinary language the get along with everybody INFJs. So INFJs are very nice and tend to get along with everyone, and usually at the expense of a repressed NI function, or at least some of the potentialities of the NI functions are repressed. So it's not a surprise that this kind of INFJ tends to be often difficult to recognize as an INFJ, and sometimes they might tell you, or you might discover they're INFJ, and you might even ask yourself, are they really that, or could they be mistyped? Now, the funny thing is, it often happens that they are not mistyped, but they just don't show that side to the world. You know, they show a much more submissive side. This is what I like to call it, because they submit to what they perceive external demands to impose on them, and they decide that they're going to bend to those demands in order to have an easy time, in order not to experience a lot of inner and outer conflict. And that adaptive submissive INFJ is extremely common. It's perhaps a little bit less common online, because I think that online there's a lot of INFJs that are looking for ways to express themselves authentically. Online there are probably formerly adaptive INFJs sort of heading towards another subtype, or alternatively INFJs that are still struggling with the issues of the adaptiveness sort of theme. Because it's, even if you're not that subtype, even across your lifespan, you will experience situations where the temptation of adaptive submission is going to reemerge. And of course, it's a suboptimal approach, because you're denying your inmost potential in a sense. You're just you're turning yourself into just anybody, just so that you could get along with everybody. It saves you perceived pain and conflict, but again at the expense of a life that is probably not as deep and colorful and meaningful, since meaning is such an important theme of the infinite soul, as it could be. And in a later video we'll be looking at, in the next video tomorrow in fact, we'll be looking at the first strategy to get out of this mode, and we'll see that in fact this strategy, which is to go into the solipsistic mode, which is the second subtype, solipsistic INFJ, is also suboptimal. But it could be almost like a Hegelian sort of synthesis approach. It could be an unnecessary step in order to get to liberation as a synthetic third step. So tomorrow we'll be looking at solipsism, which in some sense is the flip side of adaptiveness. But until then, I wish you a lovely day. Don't forget my Patreon page. People have been supporting me more lately. It really helps to keep the channel afloat. There's a link down below where you can click and support me from €3 a month. In fairness, to be completely honest, it's mostly to support me. You're able to interact with me, ask me questions in private, or respond to some posts I share on the Patreon page. But it's mostly if you want me to keep going and have the means to keep going, please consider supporting me. Okay, see you tomorrow guys, take care, bye bye.